Hello artists, what we are going to be focusing on today is adding watercolor to your Zentangle landscape. At this point, all students should pretty much have any patterns that they are adding to their artwork completely finished and gone over with Sharpie. Before you even touch watercolor, one of the things that I would recommend is just taking an eraser and again touching up any areas where you can still see some pencil marks from when you originally drew your drawing and your patterns. When you are done with that step and making sure that you can't see any pencil marks, you are then ready for watercolor. When we are working with watercolor, we are going to be needing a few materials, your project of course, and then you will need a watercolor palette from Mrs. Stalky. So you each will be getting 8 colors within your watercolor palette. You can just flip this little tab open that up. Inside you should have a brush and then of course your 8 colors. You will also need a cup of water that's filled up about halfway. Mrs. Stalky has cups for all of you. And you may also need a paper towel. The paper towel works out really nicely because if you were to put too much paint down on the paper, you can pick it up with the paper towel. If you need to kind of try fixing a mistake, or if it gets too dark, you can lighten that color up with the paper towel. So we'll go over that as we're going. And then what I would recommend also is just sliding maybe a little piece of newspaper underneath your project while you're working, so that you do not get any paint on the table beneath you. So if I were to just slide some scrap papers under here, I can do that right now. To avoid getting any on the table. Especially if you're working at home, artists too. If you're at a desk or something, you may want to maybe put your art room folder underneath it or something, or newspaper works out too. The paper that you have drawn on is watercolor paper, and one of the reasons we use a specific kind of paper is because it holds water better than other papers. And kind of absorbs the moisture a little bit better than other papers that are a little bit thinner. So you'll notice that the paper is really thick when you're using it in order to hold the water. And when we're thinking about watercolor paints, it is very, very much so different than an acrylic paint or tempera paint or something else you may have used before. Really, to use watercolor, one of the reasons it's kind of called watercolor is because you need to activate it using water. We are going to be working really lightly with the paint. It is meant to be a combination of the paint and the water mixed together that goes on your paper. So we're not digging in this pigment trying to get all of it out. We are mixing it with water, tinting the water, and applying it to our paper. So it's not meant to be dug into. That actually ruins the paint. You're just going to brush a little bit of water on the paint that you would like to use. And what you'll see is that mixes with the water on your brush, and you can apply that to your paper. If you know that you are going to be blending and creating a smooth gradient between 2 colors, what I usually recommend for students is to take your brush, dip it in the water first, and just kind of lightly go over the area that you are going to add color to, very carefully. So I'm just going to start with my sky, and I'd like to do a sunset. And if you think about a sunset, we see purple, red, blue tones, usually closer to the horizon line where the sun is setting. You'll see the yellow of the sun peeking over the mountains. Here is how I'm going to do that. So I'm just going to add a little bit of water, not a whole lot, to my sky before doing that. And I am going to work from the bottom up of my sky. So I'm going to start with the yellow first, so that I can move up towards the top part of my sky. So I'm going to take some water, kind of dab that off on my water cup, and then just kind of move that brush around the surface of the yellow very lightly. And when I'm ready, I can apply that to the paper. So I always go in horizontal strokes across the page, especially for the sky. And I am just starting to go along my mountains very carefully with my brush and adding a yellow to it. If there's a little bit of white showing through the paper, it's not the end of the world. I actually kind of like how that's looking. So then what I want to do is start with my next color. So I'm going to wash my brush as I'm switching between colors. I'm going to pick up a little bit of orange and begin my next color. Again, really carefully working through this. It doesn't need to be very dark, artists. The watercolor can be super light and very effective on your artwork, so don't feel like it has to be super dark. But if it is too light, remember you can always go back and add more paint to your brush too. So I'm going to be very careful around my cloud because I want that to stay white, so I have to be careful there. And then while that paint is still wet, you want to blend those two colors together. So I'm going to kind of drag my orange into my yellow a little bit, just very lightly. Drag it into my yellow and go back and forth with those horizontal brush strokes all the way across the page in order to blend them. And I'm going to leave it light for now. I can always remember, I can go back and add layers later, but I'm going to leave it light. I really like the look of that. And my next color that I will be adding is my red, which is going to look a little bit darker than the orange. And I'm going to drag that red into the orange. Be very careful around my trees. It's looking pretty good. Be really careful in this area around the clouds and the trees. And again, I'm using those horizontal brush strokes and just really slowly working my way all the way across for the sky. So these are what we call light watercolor washes. A wash of paint is kind of a light layer of paint that you mix with water. That's why we call it a wash. And we're working through these. So right now I'm doing my red wash. Red wash of paint all the way across. And then with a sunset, you traditionally have these purple tones that then blend into your blue. Now, of course, there's so many different options with the sunset as far as what colors you can do. Some of you may choose not to even add any purple, but I am going to treat this as if this is actually the moon, I think, instead of the sun, so that it's a dark night approaching. And the cool thing, artists, about this is I think when you look into the sky, you don't always see all dark tones or all light tones, so it's nice when you have some areas that are darker and some areas that you leave a little bit lighter, because naturally that is what we see when we look up into the sky. It's not just one solid purple or one solid blue color that we see. It's a transition of different colors, and also how light and dark they get is different too. I'm really liking that purple. I think I just need a little bit more on my right hand side here. Darken this up a little bit. And I am just going to drag that down until it blends in with my red. Just like that. And if it ever does get too dark in an area, you can always take your paper towel and you can dab it on that area, and you can lift up the paint. So you'll see I can actually pick up that purple paint that I added, and it's now on my paper towel. So if you ever make a little mistake, you can see if the paper towel will work to remove part of the color. Looking pretty good. Might even add a little bit of blue in there on the very edge. Get more of an indigo purple. Good. My mountains, I will do kind of a blue tint to those right in here. And the other fun part is I might even go in and add some color to patterns. So right through here you have some kind of river-like formations going down the mountain. I'll add those in right away. See, I got a little blue in my sky right there, so I can take my paper towel and dab that off quick. Now the other cool thing is light reflects off of different objects within your drawing. So if my moon or sun is reflecting off of my trees, I might have a yellow tint to this side of the trees and then a green tint on the inside to show some shading. So what I might do is take the yellow of the sun, apply a little bit of yellow to my trees on the sides closest to the sun, and then I can go in and do my green tones after that and blend them into the yellow a little bit, so that I have kind of a yellow-green on the edge there. Need to use a really small brush for this and be careful along the edges because I just accidentally got into my sky. It's really easy to do that with watercolor because the paint wants to spread when you apply it to your paper. Because of course it's mixed with water, so naturally that paint wants to spread. Still way too light, so I'm going to go in and add more green. So if you ever need to darken a color, you just add more paint. If you need to lighten an area, you can just add water directly to the page. A little bit in my sky here. Take that green off. Good. Same thing with my water down here. I may do most of it blue, but then as I go up towards the top, I'm going to show the reflections of light in the water. So when I do the blue, as it gets towards the sun, which is the light source, I'm going to get lighter with the water as well. And then darker with the water, maybe even kind of more purple tones as I go away from the light source, which is the sun. Horizontal brush strokes going straight across the page again. Always make sure you're adding water to your paints. Water allows the paint to move. If you don't have water with it, you'll notice the paint won't do much. What I might do is have that reflection of the sun show in the water here. So I'm going to do a little bit of yellow in here, a little bit of orange, a little bit of red, teensy bit of purple to blend that into my blue. That got really dark on me, so I might have to go back and change that. So if it gets too dark, I can always spread the paint out a little bit and try getting some of this really dark purple to move down my page. I can drag that around. I'm liking how that looks so far. I want it to look as if the sun is reflecting in the water. Using the same colors in the opposite direction in my water too. I might do some more purple right in this section so that it shows that it gets darker going away from the sun. And for my land, I'll do a little bit of yellow and maybe even some brown in there to make it appear almost as if it's kind of like a muddy color in here. And then I'm going to have it get lighter towards the sun again and then darker towards the outside of the drawing. If I think that's too dark of a purple, I might just add a little bit of water and try spreading that out a little bit so it's not so dark in there. Good, good. I want to see different tones in the water, not just a solid blue. And lastly, I'm going to use kind of my black to just mix a little bit of water with a little bit of black to add a gray tone to my rocks down here. Some of my rocks will be darker, some lighter. I don't want them all looking the same. Gets too dark, add a little water to my brush to spread that paint out. The only part I would probably consider adding things at this point would be maybe some brown in these areas here. I have to be really careful through those areas. And I might even go over the pattern. Yeah, I think that looks pretty neat. So don't be afraid to add some colors to your patterns too. I do think it is kind of cool though to leave some of them black and white so that you have that contrast between color. We want that balance between color and black and white areas, so it's looking pretty good. Just need to do a little blending right in here. Add some water to my brush and just make sure those are blended really nicely. Just like that. And when you're finished, you can carefully remove the newspaper from underneath and bring that over to the drying rack. And as far as cleanup procedures, throwing away your paper towel, make sure you wash the brush thoroughly under running water when you're done. Dump your cup out, and then when you're finished, you can actually put your paintbrush right back into your palette that you were using and close that up for next time. If I were to go back and make any changes, the only thing I would do is maybe darken the sky a little bit and add another layer of that on there. So if I were to darken it and add another layer, now that it's kind of dry, I'll show you what that looks like. You can just see it brightens the colors up a little bit more. Just got to be really careful that you're not adding too much so it doesn't get too dark. That is looking awesome. I do like the sky being nice and vibrant and saturated with color, so coming back to another layer isn't bad. Looks really nice on here. There we go. All finished. Okie dokie.